Welcome back to another tabletop review. Today we'll take a look at the Jennings J-22 semi-automatic pistol. The Jennings J-22 is very popular, but it has a reputation of being one of the cheapest, most unreliable pistols ever made. It also has a reputation for jamming, earning it the title of Jam-O-Matic by many of its owners. Its pot metal zinc alloy construction, inferior design, and poor attention to tolerances and quality control, resulting in a distressingly substandard firearm. All that's pretty bad, but the ATF also ruled this gun extremely unsafe if dropped. Reports of J-22s accidentally firing when moving the safety is also a major complaint. The numerous lawsuits against its makers would attest to the validity of these warnings. Originally produced by the Jennings Firearm Company, run by Bruce Jennings, the son of George Jennings of Raven Arms, beginning in 1978. The last Jennings J-22s were marketed by Bryco, a company run by Bruce Jennings' ex-wife. When Bryco went bankrupt in 2003 due to a major lawsuit, that should have been the end of the J-22s. However, it wasn't, because it was eventually bought by the company's former foreman, Paul Jimenez, and as JA Industries, Jimenez renamed the J-22 the JA-22. Recent internet searches suggest that Jimenez filed for bankruptcy in 2020 in response to another lawsuit. And I've not seen anything today that would suggest the J or the JA-22 will be resurrected. That's probably not a bad thing. This particular Jennings J-22 was produced about 1990 by Calwestco, an intermediate company of Bryco. Now before we go any further, let's make sure these guns are cleared first. And by the way, if you enjoy this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now here you may want to zip ahead to about 9:05 if you're not interested in the history behind these guns. Getting back to the history of the J-22, the gun manufacturers that grew out of the George Jennings Raven Arms Company were known as the Southern California Ring of Fire Companies, based upon all of their locations being within a 100-mile circle of Los Angeles, and because they produced cheap, poor quality, small caliber handguns that were made by the thousands during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They were also referred to as Saturday Night Specials because of their links to crime. The quality of the products was poor, and because of that, over time, each of these manufacturers were basically sued out of business. However, Jennings and their associates were not only said to be unscrupulous in their business dealings, they were also tenacious. So when one went out of business, another related company in the same region would pop up to take its place and basically continue to produce the same guns. The story behind the Jennings J-22 begins with George Jennings and his company Raven Arms. George was an engineer who designed the Raven P-25. His son Bruce started the Jennings Firearms Company, which took the Raven P-25 and scaled it down to a .22 long rifle. Thus, in 1978, the J-22 was born. There's also a J-25. Now things can get a little confusing because you'll find that the same pistol stamped with Jennings, Calwestco, or Bryco. Bryco, for example, was started in 1985 when Bruce Jennings was facing the prospects of losing his federal firearm license for a felony assault charge. Bruce then sold his Jennings Firearms Company to Calwestco, owned by his former office manager Gene Johnson. After plea bargaining the charge down to a misdemeanor, Bruce Jennings converted Jennings Firearms into a firearms wholesaler and established a new company, Bryco Arms, controlled by his ex-wife Janice, to manufacture firearms. Jennings Firearms, now a wholesaler, bought guns from both Calwestco and Bryco Arms and resold them to distributors. In 1991, Calwestco closed due to litigation problems. If you recall a story about a 12-year-old child being left paralyzed after being accidentally shot by the boyfriend of a babysitter with the family's .380 handgun and then winning a lawsuit for $24 million, this company, Bryco, was that company. And remember Jennings and JA Industries and the Jennings J-22? Jennings was started up after Bryco was sued out of business, as I said earlier, and so it went with these Ring of Fire companies. Whether these gun manufacturers should have been sued out of existence is still a debate, but there's still a doubt in my mind that the J-22 is a perfect example of a junk gun. Personally, I find it rather pathetic that no substantial improvements or corrections were made to the J-22 or JA-22 for that matter throughout all this time. Yet it continued to be produced. You might be thinking, no pride, no shame, just greed. And I don't think you'd be wrong. Adding to the confusion are the different locations of Bryco in Carson City, Nevada, Irvine, California, and Costa Mesa, California. And then you get Calwestco thrown in there. The J-22 is produced under the Calwestco of Irvine, California name from 1985 to 1991, overlapping with Bryco, also of Irvine, California, which also produced the J-22 from 1988 through 2004. Now I have this chrome J-22 that is stamped with the Jennings swashbuckler logo by Bryco of Irvine, California, with a serial number in the 400,000s, whereas this blue J-22 is also stamped with the swashbuckler logo and made by Calwestco, also of Irvine, California, but with a serial number in the 600,000s. So the blue gun was made later, but we also know the swashbuckler logo was removed on later models, and the Bryco name replaced the Calwestco name later. So it would suggest this blue model was probably produced during the transition to Bryco or between 1988 and 1991. Because the box lid shows it was made for either the 22 or the 25 model, I'd say it was probably closer to 1990. And as for this chrome Bryco J-22, I actually picked it out of the trash at a gun range many years ago. It needed a firing pin spring, and a follower, which I think I paid $30 for back then. But it's always had jamming problems. I've used it as my primary example of one of the worst guns ever made. So far, nothing's topped it for that honor. You know, it wasn't more than a few years ago that these Jennings 22s and even the 25 caliber pistols basically had no value. It was common to find ones that were in even like new condition selling for under $100, usually closer to $50. But something really strange has been going on during the past couple of years. As I've followed auctions, I've noticed that these junk guns continue to sell for higher and higher amounts, like closer to 150, even 175 today. Likewise, the cost of parts for these Jennings handguns has also skyrocketed. One magazine will cost you at least $40. I'm not sure why this is happening, but it's caused me to take another look at these guns. Given what I said about Jennings J-22's questionable reliability, why would I buy this gun? First, I'll admit that I'm a sucker for these small vest pocket style guns. Even their disreputable reputation, they still represent a period of American gun manufacturing that is a part of our history. This is a novelty gun for me and my interest as a collector. So while I was at a gun show this year, I saw this 1990 J-22 in excellent condition with its original box and paperwork and with 2 magazines. The owner accepted my offer of $125, probably $25 more than it was worth. But if I just parted this gun out, I'd easily make back my investment. Of course, it's not my intent. As I pointed out in other reviews, these guns were not built for longevity. Remember that if you think you might get one for self-defense. At best, if you take care of it and don't overwork it, it might perform okay for a while, but I wouldn't count on it. Now this is where I usually talk about movies that these guns might have been in. It surprised me to see that the Jennings J-22 indeed has been in movies. It had a very brief scene in the 1982 Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy movie 48 Hours. And the J-22 is also seen in the 1999 movie Diplomatic Siege with Daryl Hannah as a secret agent Erica Long. You'd think the CIA would be able to provide their agents with better equipment. This is a pretty good example of how the J-22 would have come. Here's the medium blue box with a gun and 2 magazines and the paperwork. Note that this Calwestco Irvine, California box and paperwork are for the J-22 and J-25 firearms. As I understand, that's unusual. The early Jennings J-22 boxes just said made in America with U.S. parts and included a yellow warning sheet. The yellow warning sheet cautions against trying to feed cartridges with the safety on or carrying with a cartridge loaded in the barrel. There may have been one of those warning sheets with this gun originally, and it may have been lost. However, note the manual also has the caution about not placing a cartridge in the barrel until you're ready to shoot. I've seen boxes that state on the cover, extra magazine included. This box does not, although it does have the extra magazine. The serial number on the box matches the guns, and it shows the options available at the time. The gun could be blue, chrome, or nickel finished. Note that this gun was originally sold with black combat grips. The walnut grips were an upgrade and are still available today for about $15 on eBay. The original sale price on the box says $89.95. Pretty cheap for even a 90s gun. The Jennings J-22 is a pot metal gun which is basically an investment casted zinc alloy slide and frame. That should be a warning right there. They can be easily finished to look attractive, like chromed, but unfortunately pot metal is weak and prone to failure. Good example of lipstick on a pig. The barrel is 2.5 inches in length. Sights are fixed built into the top of the slide. Slide serrations on the rear of the slide are well defined. Overall height is 3 inches. Overall length is 4.93 inches. Width is 0.9 inches at the grip. These grips are walnut, but black plastic and white plastic were also available. Weight with an empty magazine is 12 ounces. Magazine capacity is 6. The mag release is here, and the safety is here. Down to fire, up for safe. Note that older J-22s before about 1988 have a slide safety. The trigger travel is short, but the pole seems heavy, about 11 pounds. Well, obviously this is not a target gun, and as I warned earlier, I strongly suggest that you don't rely on the J-22 as a self-defense weapon. Too unreliable. I view the J-22 as strictly a plinking gun at best. Be cautious with this gun because of its history of accidental discharge. These guns have an embarrassing track record for jamming, but I found that higher quality, higher powered ammo like Remington High Velocity or CCI Stingers, as is recommended in the manual, do indeed seem to help the gun run better. The other suggestion is to make sure that you keep the gun clean and properly lubricated with a quality gun oil. Personally, I like Mossy Oak CLP or Frog Lube. Also, as I've heard, these guns can need a break-in period, so I'm expecting this blued Calwestco J-22 to demonstrate some problems just because, from what I can see, it probably hasn't seen much use, if any. We'll see, but this will be the first that I've shot it. Okay, here we are at the range. I decided to use CCI Stingers, or as they'd be called in the South, Stangers. They're recommended for the J-22. At 1,640 feet per second, they're a pretty hot round. CCI Mini-Mags are only 1,235 feet per second by comparison. And of course we begin with problems. Failure to eject the spent shell and failure to feed are common. Let's try the second magazine. Getting a little better. But now I've got a shell stuck in there. I give up. Let's try my old chrome Bryco J-22. And of course it jams. Okay, let's go to another range, another day, and about 200 rounds later. Not good. Starting already with a failure to eject. And there we go again. You know, I've run more than 100 rounds through this this Calwestco J-22. Should be better. To be honest, I'm surprised at my accuracy. Very good. I think it's getting better. And another failure to eject. This is why you can't rely on J-22s. They may work, they may not. Okay. Okay, 2 whole magazines in a row without a jam. Wow. Let's try the chrome Bryco J-22 again. Yep, failure to eject. It never really goes through more than a round at a time. You know, I'm not really sure why I even bother. I've checked everything on this gun and replaced a number of parts, but I seem to always have the same problem. And again, failure to eject. And that's enough. As I've already stated, the first and biggest con of the Jennings guns is their tendency to discharge if dropped, making them extremely unsafe. Another con is their lineage and association with the Jennings family companies. Also, there's no denying their unreliability. And due to their weak pot metal slide and frame, cracks are common. But even the internal parts are of just poor quality. There's just no denying the J-22's reputation for failure. I think the chrome J-22 may just be worn out, but when you begin with pot metal parts and truly bad design, you're in trouble. You've built in a very short time till failure from the very beginning. The biggest advantages of the Jennings J-22 is its size for concealment and cost. Although prices seem to be rising for used J-22s, they're still pretty cheap. Because these guns were so cheap originally, many were bought by people who knew nothing about guns but thought they should have a gun. Many have never been fired, which could be a good thing, and can be found in new-in-the-box condition at pawn shops and auctions. Before the recent rush on buying guns, you could pick these up for between $50 and $75 easily. For a lot of people, that might be all they could afford for a self-defense firearm. And as I already said, although I'm not a fan of 22 long rifle for self-defense, it's better than nothing, and if your shots are properly placed, a 22 can be effective. Disassembly and reassembly of this gun isn't difficult at all. First thing we're going to do is remove the magazine and take the safety off. Just check that it's unloaded. And then this takedown button back here just needs to be pressed in. And we're going to lift up a little bit on the slide. Have to just find the sweet spot. There it is. And we can remove the slide from the frame. You remove the recoil spring and the components here with the firing pin. There's the firing pin, the spring, and then the follower. And that's it for takedown. Reassembly is the opposite. Returning the firing pin, the spring, and the follower. Return the recoil spring, and then we have to push that takedown button back in just a little bit. Bring the slide back a little bit, and there it is. Test for function, and I suggest don't dry fire these guns. Of course, these J-22s are no longer being produced, but new-in-the-box guns can still be found. In their early days, many were sold for about $70. Many for about $50 at pawn shops. New, this pistol sold for $89.95 in the early 90s. Even 2 years ago, you could easily buy a used one for less than $100. Today, J-22s in good condition are selling for between $125 and $175. But to be honest, since a new Phoenix HP-22A sells for about $200, I'd say the Phoenix would obviously be the safer, smarter, and more functional purchase for a cheap 22. But because an early used Ruger LCP-380 can usually be found at most gun stores for under $250, I'd suggest the Ruger. Now, before we end today's video, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. And thanks for watching. So wrapping up, I think the closer you look at the J-22 and the more you know about it, the more cautious you'll become of even firing one. If you have one you inherited, I suggest trading it. If you're dead set on having one, lower your expectations. Don't expect perfection. Understand that it'll probably be ammo finicky. So expect jams, and certainly don't rely on one as a self-defense weapon. The J-22 is what it is, and that's not much. And remember, it has real safety issues, so handle it very carefully. Now, comparing the J-22 to the Phoenix HP-22 or the Taurus PT-22, or even more reputable, reliable, yet affordable higher caliber guns of about the same size like the Ruger LCP-380 or even the slightly larger Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 380, it's a no-brainer. In the long run, you'll be happier and safer if you just walk away from the J-22. Trust me on this. Now, that being said, any weapon you carry is better than the one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.